Good morning. I'm Mark Allen from Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Andrew Satz, the CEO and co-founder of Evolve. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Excellent, excellent. Even with all the hysteria, I'm doing excellent.
All right. So why don't get started? Why don't you just share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure. I'm a data scientist and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've founded a few companies in my lifetime. I've worked in a wide variety of fields. Started off hospitality, insurance, the music industry, and risk management. And for the past decade, really focused on technology, development of technology. I've been designing software since for about 20 years, but now really focused on AI.
Very interesting. Very appropriate for the time.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as a remote employee and a remote employer?
I have been working remote for almost 15 years. I just say working from home, but for about 10 of those years, it was working for someone else, and for the past 5 years, it's been for myself and with a team underneath me. I found that in the early days, it was a really hard thing to adjust to. I think that the challenge is that when you're working from home, you're always at the office and you're always at home. So I think that's sort of like an interesting, depending on the type of personality that one has, to be able to sort of manage those two sides. And then on the other side of leading a team, or sort of helping guide a team that is remote, how does one sort of help facilitate their ability to engage while giving them the freedom to do the tasks at hand, or whatever maximizing their skill set. Because of the current situation that we're in with the coronavirus and everybody sort of moving from working in an office to working from home, I've actually shared sort of 3 guiding principles that I view that sort of, as I talk to people who've never experienced it before, in my experience. So at least from the, as someone who hasn't done it, I think the first is has a lot to do with the fact that you're always at the office and you're always at home. Is to say, set aside an area in your home or wherever you are that is dedicated for work. This helps 2 different kinds of people. They're the kinds of people who who are going to be in their think of home as a place of respite or leisure. And so what that does is it sort of says, this is me going to the office, right? I'm going to the office. When I'm here, I'm not watching television, because if you work from your couch and you also watch TV on your couch, then you could very easily switch between those 2, right? Or if you work in your bed and you also sleep in your bed, then you can easily switch between those 2. This sort of isolates those 2 areas. The other side is those individuals who tend to overwork, right? And where you're always at the office. This really separates that line. It says, unless you're at that spot in your home where you're working, don't work. Right? That's it. Don't work. When you're with your family eating dinner or you're cooking, you're not working. When you're on the couch and you're watching television or reading a book, you're not working. You're enjoying your leisure time. So it really allows you to separate those spaces. And really trying to take a shower, clean yourself up, right? Get dressed. Because if you're really trying to fool yourself, right? You're trying to fool your mind into acclimating to that situation. So if you're in your pajamas, right? Like, are you really being more comfortable, or are you more being working? The second thing that I say to people is that now that you're working from home, naps are your friend. And I'll explain. Like, it comes across a little strange when I first say it to people, because they're usually like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" Well, when you're in the office, you can't take a nap. And we've all been working, had lunch, and then get that sleepies right afterwards, and right, like, you're just dragging. Productivity just drops. So, if you had the ability, you might take a nap, 20, 30 minutes, no more than that, right? Because otherwise it's a waste of the day. And also your brain just slows down. It's sort of like when you wake up in the morning, how you're just slow. You don't want to have that time. But the idea is that so our brains consume a large portion of the energy of our bodies. I think it's something around 30 to 40%. So when we're working at home, we tend to have less distractions in terms of our ability to focus. So you're not taking a break for coffee. You're not taking a break to go to the bathroom. You're not taking a break to talk to coworkers. You're really hyper-focused on your work. And so we end up tending to use a lot more energy. And so our burnout time actually comes faster because when we're working at home. So what one should do, or at least what I recommend, I don't know what people should do, what they want to do. Some people say take a walk. I think that's fine. But the part of the reason I suggest taking a nap, or at least lying down and closing your eyes, is that your optic nerve, your optical cortex, actually is one of the largest consumers of energy of your brain. So by closing your eyes, you're actually allowing yourself to sort of relax your brain, restore the energy. I mean, whether it's meditation or sleeping or just keeping your eyes closed for 20 minutes, it's a restorative process. The last one is probably the most controversial, which is there's studies that have shown that most people in an 8-hour workday only do get about 2 to 3 hours of work done. This is very well studied. Business school studies, like these are all well studied. So what does that suggest? It suggests that actually productivity in the workplace is only about 3 hours. Now, the 8-hour workday is a product of the early 20th century, the Industrial Revolution, the unions bringing up the 8-hour workday. I mean, it goes back further than that, thinking about like the amount of time that there's sunlight and things like that. But let's assume that it's just like that. So we are operating a 21st century businesses from a early 20th century or late 19th century mentality. And it could be why there's not this sort of functionality when you're thinking about like people who are working using their brains, right? So the reason I say, so what I end up saying to people is, if you do it smartly, you could actually turn your workday, compress your productivity of your workday into 4 hours. Compress it into 4 hours, right? If you do it smartly. Because if you're really only working 2 to 3 hours in the office, if one is only really working 2 to 3 hours in the office, again, depends on the role that someone has. If their sales role, it's probably a little bit different. If you're only working 2 to 3 hours in the office, right? Then that means potentially you could get all your work done, all your tasks done in 4 hours, which leaves you an additional 6 hours that you would have been at work. And the reason I say 6 is I just judge like an hour to and from work. So like you have an additional 6 hours that you've actually gained in your life that you could use for leisure, or you could also use to improve yourself as a person to make those 4 hours better at your 4 hours. Reading books on leadership, or reading books on, or learning a new skill by taking an online course. And this is why I was able in my life, when I'm working from home, compress my workload in 4 hours and able to do other things like start businesses, teach myself how to code, other skills that I added, learn more, read on leadership, or on how to be more productive and like not do time management. It really it then helped facilitate those 4 hours to make them even more useful. And so that's because if you did that at the office, if you're like sitting at the office with your feet up on the desk reading a book, someone's going to walk by and be like, what is this person doing? Right? Like lazy bum, right? So.
And he could be the most productive person in the company, but
correct.
It's the perception.
Correct. It is the perception. Yes. And now the perception's not there.
Right.
I mean, right.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've been working from home for over 10 years and it's amazing. You get so much more just the not having to drive an hour to work, to and from work every day. You gain an hour.
Correct.
Just that alone.
Correct.
is a huge productivity increase. And
correct.
Usually when you drive, and if in San Francisco there's traffic, you get to work and you're a little ramped up.
Correct.
Right.
And you don't start working till 10, or you may get to the office at 9, but you really don't start being productive till 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, right? And this is, I mean, it's not true for everybody, but a lot of people that's what happened to. And then like as the end of the day approaches, you're sort of like thinking about what you're going to do that evening, maybe go to the gym or what you're going to cook for dinner.
Mm.
And so you're less focused on what you're working on. So the idea of saying, and then you have lunch in the middle of the day. So there's the idea of the 2 to 3 hours or 4 hours of work that you're actually doing. Because you really say 10 to 12, you might work, right? And then, you know, you're out for lunch and maybe 1 to 4 you're working, and maybe they're having those breaks in between or something like that. So
Yeah,
it makes sense. Yeah.
I agree. So on that note, what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think needs to be done differently to make it better and more effective?
So I think that we're going to see a significant scale up in work, especially because of what happened now. I mean, our company, we were always remote. I told people when they would join our team, I'm like, I don't care where you are. You could work from Fiji. To me, it doesn't matter where you are. As long as you have an internet connection and you're getting your work done, your tasks done, whatever you're responsible for. I don't care where you are, and I don't care how. I honestly, I just want to make sure people are available. I think the biggest challenge for the future of remote work, has to do with leadership. It really has to be the people who are leading the teams need to create these systems that allow for engagement, right? So you're maximizing engagement. Whatever that engagement needs to be, because it's going to be very business dependent, but you're maximizing engagement and thoughtful and useful engagement, not meetings for the purpose of meetings. It's meetings to provide resources and feedback. I mean, I'm a servant leader. That's the type of leadership. And I'm also a total ownership leader. Those are sort of like the two ways that I think about that. So I would be having, at least once a week, a meeting with my team, sometimes more, to say, what can I do to help you, right? How can I be a resource? What gaps are you missing? So that visual communication, because we can chat on the various channels, whether you're using Teams or Slack or whatever. We can chat on those, but you need that personal connection. I feel we need that personal connection, and through video conference, having those connections, and setting guidelines, right? And time limits on what are happening in these meetings. So if you're meeting with if one is meeting with their leadership team and you say, the meeting is going to be from 8 to 9, you have an agenda, you follow that agenda, and someone is actually orchestrating the conversations so that you don't get everyone talking at once, right? So I really think it's a matter, in order for it to be successful, leaders need to be very thoughtful about how they're orchestrating things and experimenting as well, because you're going to have mistakes, and getting feedback from the team, right? How did this, then try something, how did this meeting work for you, right? And then take that feedback and try to make it so that individual team member's feedback is actually taken into the next online meeting, right? So, because when you're leading a team, for me, from a leadership perspective, when leading a team, we can't lead everybody the same way. Everybody has their own personalities. So depending, for me, a good leader is flexible in that regard, at least from my perspective. I mean, it's different leadership styles, may be critical of this, but I think that as a good leader, one should be flexible to the needs of the team. And that's sort of like how you bring it up. I'm more of a Rudolph than a Santa in that regard.
Interesting analogy. Yeah. So you spell evolve EVQLV. So can you go explain that and tell us what your company does?
Yeah, sure. So our company uses artificial intelligence, and I'm saying artificial intelligence in air quotes because it really depends on who I'm speaking to when I say AI. We do artificial intelligence to discover drugs, novel therapeutics. And specifically, we're focused on an area of drugs called biologics. So from a very high level, there's two types of drugs. There's small molecules and biologics. Small molecules are like chemical-based drugs. Biologics are drugs that come from living things. And so we use machine learning to discover, optimize, and really try to accelerate the speed at which drugs are discovered and delivered to those who are in need, those who really need healing. The name itself, the reason it's spelled EVQLV and evolve. Well, first of all, when we looked for evolve.com or evolution.com, that was not available. Our algorithms, one of our core algorithms is actually an evolutionary algorithm. It predicts, it tries to simulate or model evolution, the evolutionary forces that have produced what we are today and the sort of diversity of life. But one of the things is when we looked at, when we're running our algorithms, some of the first times, we're working across amino acid sequences. Now, the way amino acids are represented in a very simple way is that there's 20 common amino acids that make up most life, right? Especially humans. And they're represented by letters of the alphabet.
Mm.
And so the first 5 amino acids of one of the drugs we were working on was actually EVQLV. And so when we saw it, we're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. That looks like the word evolve, and we're doing evolutionary algorithms. And I think the other thing is that we're really trying to change the way life science is examined from a technological perspective. So by changing that O into a Q, it's sort of like a good way to sort of say, hey, we're really trying to change the perspective. It also has that sort of startup-y feel, sometimes people put a 3 instead of a B or a 4 instead of an A. So it's sort of like that as well. So that's where the name comes from.
Oh, very interesting. So in the current situation with the ongoing pandemic, many companies have been forced to go remote within just the last 2 weeks. So what do you think are the major roadblocks and challenges that they're facing?
I think it goes back again to leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like really facilitating your like being aware of the needs of the employees and how different and how they need to adapt to that situation. But I think that there's also a lot of benefit to what happens. So aside from the roadblocks, like obviously there are roadblocks, and I think it really has to do with how do you help people transition from being in an office to working from home, and which is why I brought up those 3 items that I recommend every time I talk to somebody. I was like, hey, I've done this, been doing this for a long time. Let me tell you what, from my experience, from my failures, let me tell you like all the times I failed at this and what the system that I come up with for myself. And maybe it's useful to some people, maybe it isn't. But I think that the roadblocks are leaders who understand how to help the team transition, but also leaders who have to learn to transition themselves, right? So, and I think that that's the 2 sides of it. I think those are the biggest roadblocks. I think technology is there, right? Zoom makes it easy. We use Google Hangouts. So, everybody has all these things. I think that's one side of it. I think the other side of it is that the in-person touch points that there is the side of the industry, so like the sales side of the industry. That's actually like where it's really hard. But actually, I actually think it could be considered something better, right? Because if remote work is the new normal, think about how many more sales visits one can do when one doesn't have to drive from one position to another or fly, right? So you're taking the advantage of that efficiency. And so I think that there are a lot of positives to the situation. It's why from the very beginning, I've said to our team, everyone can work remote. There are some people who are just better in an office. They feel more comfortable in an office. They find it to be better. And eventually we'll see that transition back. But I don't think it's going to be necessary for everybody. I think what we're starting to realize is that we are in the 21st century. It is like the idea of an office is a product of the 50s, right?
Right.
Like, is it maybe a little bit earlier than that? But let's just say the 50s, where, those advertising agencies and the law offices and sort of the sprouting up of the need to be in an office, you had the door-to-door salespeople. That's still going to be around, but perhaps now those door-to-doors are, conference call to conference, web conference to web conference. And so I really think it allows for a lot more efficiency. But again, the roadblock really goes back to leadership and like teaching oneself how to fit in that space.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've talked to some people that just have a hard time grasping the idea that people work from home, and because they don't have that control, and they have to learn to trust and let go and trust that the people are doing their jobs.
Correct. And I think that's sort of like a micromanagement view,
yes,
which is useful. Micromanagement has its place, but I don't think it should be like the universal leadership style. I think the other big challenge is when we're working from home, we do have the distractions of home. So if you live in a 2-bedroom house, you have a child, who, and I say a child, not like a teenager, right? Like a child. That can be very challenging, right? But I think that because it's been universally occurring across everyone at the same exact time, everyone's cutting everyone some slack. If we try to do this as a businesses and transition slowly, I think it would have been harder, because then people would have been judging more if someone had children in the background. Now that's happening to everybody, right? And like also the other things that are going on, someone ringing your doorbell, right? Like your dog's barking, right? Or whatever other distractions that could be happening, the laundry operating in the background, you know, or even like your significant other or someone you live with is also on a conference call and having that sort of bounce back. I think that those are some of the challenges. But I think that what's happening is because of the scenario when everyone's being very understanding about this, right? Everyone's being very forgiving about this. And that forgiving nature is I think it's going to continue on.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, this has been great. I'd like to thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much.
And best of luck with
appreciate
Evolve.
it, Mark. Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Well, have a nice day, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much.